Welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue talking today about the Great Depression and the New Deal. The New Deal is what President Roosevelt calls all of his government programs. Now, Roosevelt was a Keynesian economist. He believed in Keynesian theory, which meant he believed that the government should put money into the bad economy to try to help it. And his programs were called the New Deal. So this election of 1932, we're going to look first at this election. And Hoover, his economic policies, he wanted to help, but he believed that you should be putting money into the big businesses. The big businesses, if they invest money into the economy, they'll hire people. And if they hire people, those people will now have jobs and have income and can spend and help the economy. And so he didn't only put money into big businesses, but that was really his target. He has this idea called, Americans under him have this idea of rugged individualism, meaning be tough, hang in there, things will get better. But he wasn't doing much to help. And so he does some things, but Americans just don't think that he's doing enough. And so as we saw from the last lesson, in 1932, they elected FDR overwhelmingly. It's not even close. Hoover wins only a few states in the northeastern United States. So Roosevelt had condemned Hoover's reckless spending, he called it. But then what does Roosevelt do? Roosevelt spends lots and lots of money. So Hoover people often think of Hoover as the stand-aside, doesn't want to do anything president, but he's not really a do-nothing president. He does something, but he targets the bigger businesses. So Roosevelt comes into office in March of 1933, March 5. The first day he comes into office, he closes banks. And this is called, we're going to talk in this lesson about the first 100 days. He closes banks. 5,000 banks failed during the Great Depression. 5,000. People had no confidence in the bank. If you were going to give your money to somebody and trust that they would have it in 2 weeks when you go back to get your money, and they're gone, they're closed. Your bank is now a bakery. And where did your money go? You don't get your money is gone. 5,000 banks closed. People did not trust banks. They begin to put their money in jars and bury the jars in the backyard. For 4 days, Roosevelt closed the banks, and during that 4 days, he convinced people and talked to people and convinced them that the banks are safe and that people should be putting their money into the banks. And during that, in the first part of that, he passes what's called the Emergency Banking Act, and there's a slide that starts with that, the Emergency Banking Act. And he creates the FDIC, which means that if you put money into the bank, that money will be there. There will be insurance. Even if the bank closes, the federal government will pay you back up to $5,000. Now, 2/3 of the banks were not insured when the market crashed. You could buy insurance on your own, but it wasn't required. Today, anybody that puts money into a bank is going to have FDIC insurance. Increased government regulation on banks. And he also managed or closed unhealthy banks. Also in the first 100 days, we look at the next slide, he passed 3 programs, and 3 of these programs are very famous. And many places in the United States, especially in the eastern part of the United States, you'll see what's called the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps. And now, the CCC doesn't exist today, but the programs that the CCC did still do exist today. And what the CCC was work camps for young men who could work and earn money, but they had to send it home to their family, and they would get 3 meals a day, a place to sleep, and a job. And that money they had would go home to feed their family. And that was the CCC. And there was the Tennessee Valley Authority. And the Tennessee Valley Authority, also a very important one, electrified, built dams so that we could generate electricity for poor areas. And particularly here in the Tennessee Valley, which is Alabama, Mississippi, and certainly in Tennessee as well. And parts of North Carolina, I believe. And also we have the Federal Emergency Relief Act. And so we have the CCC, the TVA, and FERA, F-E-R-A. On the next slide, we see the first 100 days continues with the Agricultural Adjustment Act. And this gives financial help to farmers. So farmers that cannot pay their bills, or they don't have enough food, or the crop is a bad year, or the prices are too low and they can't make enough money, then the Agricultural Adjustment Act will help them pay their mortgage or help them in whatever way that they need to be helped. And then finally on this slide, we have the National Industrial Recovery Act and the Public Works, later known as the Public Works Administration. And the National Industrial Recovery Act is very important because it funneled millions of dollars into public works programs, airports, dams, bridges, ships, schools, hospitals, police stations, fire departments, anything that's a government building. This NIRA is funneling lots and lots of money into these programs. And so the first 100 days is very important. And so Roosevelt comes in on March 4, and on March 5 he closes the banks and he begins to pass all of these new programs in the first 100 days. And Roosevelt has passed more law, more legislation than any other president in their first 100 days in office. And some presidents aim to pass as many laws as President Franklin D. Roosevelt did, but very few, none have actually. But he's seen by many Americans to have been a very good president, and some Americans think he had too much government involvement. And the question is, did he really actually help end the Great Depression? Now, we talked about the first 100 days here, and this is a short lesson because I just wanted you to focus on those first 100 days. The next lesson, we're going to talk about some of the New Deal projects that happen after the first 100 days. So we'll see you then on part 2. All right, bye-bye.